Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is enjoying the conference. I know I am. I'm learning quite a bit. A few weeks ago, I was asked to present a keynote, and I was wondering, okay, I only have a few weeks. What am I going to speak on? But this conference is pretty much an interdisciplinary conference. So I thought, okay, I'll do a presentation on something that's interdisciplinary. So I came up with a concept a long time ago called Ensemble Innovation. And that's bringing together different innovations in unique ways. Now, a lot of you may have heard of Ensemble Innovation before. And mainly out in the industry, it's equated with teams formed to create innovations. And that's very important, don't get me wrong. But I have another interpretation of that. Another perspective is innovations integrated to form a new innovation. And most people miss out on that fact. There's a lot of technologies out there, lots of boxes of knowledge that cover wide domains of technologies. And one of the keys on inventing and innovation is how can we creatively think in those boxes of knowledge. But then again, to do that, you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to learn the knowledge in those boxes to be able to innovate and invent. So I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by ensemble innovation. We're going to look at taking existing innovations integrated together to form a new innovation. And the example I'm going to give this morning is a real example. We're going to take a look at voice analytics, eye tracking technologies, and brain-computer interfaces. That might not seem like it's related, but when you place it in a certain context, it most certainly is. So voice analytics. Voice analysis is different than speech analysis. Speech analysis looks at the words and phrases and focuses on those. Voice analytics is quite different. It looks at the emotional behavior aspects of a speaker's voice. Can we tell what kind of emotions they're expressing? Are they truthful emotions? Are they false emotions? Things like that. Now, it's proven technology for call centers, banks, insurance companies, things like that. And I listed a few companies that's involved. One I work part-time for, by the way, RankMiner, down in St. Petersburg, Florida. But there's also other leading-edge voice analytics companies and entities out there. One is Beyond Verbal Communications out of Israel. Another is EmoVoice out of Germany. It's a university that's, in my opinion, bleeding edge for research for voice analytics. Okay, so what is RankMiner doing with voice analytics? Well, we saw a problem that's out there, and the big problem is 2/3 of students are failing at reading in the United States. Other countries have similar problems with that. So can we use voice analytics to help with that problem? We probably can, and we have proven that we definitely can. You see, here in the United States, we're resource starving when it comes to learning, education, and training. We don't have the manpower or the money to properly assess all of our students for their reading skills. We just can't do it. But is there an easier way to actually form a queuing mechanism to identify people who do have reading disabilities that need help? And most certainly we can. So we developed the RankMiner Reading Assessment Tool. It's the base technology for the Ensemble Innovation. Okay, our scientists looked at reading and consulted with a lot of different speech therapists and reading analysts. And we have a list of skill sets that industries identified, which makes up a good reader. And I'm not going to go through them. You can read them there. Now, the algorithm used to rank sales interest, we use the same algorithm. The only twist we did was come up with new feature vectors for the voice. And the new algorithm measures emotion expressed in speech, but from a prosody type aspect. The expression in reading, an essential attribute of reading that contributes to reading comprehension. Now prosody by itself and measuring that isn't going to give you the full analysis for assessing reading, but it most certainly can be used as a cueing mechanism to identify people who need help, desperate help, especially our young children in our school system, on improving their reading skills. So we did experiments applying the algorithm to measure reading, especially prosody. Tests did show that the machine measure was accurate to a level found only between reading experts. But again, it's not an end-all. It's a cueing mechanism. But we're going to make it an end-all. And you'll see what I mean by that in a few moments. So our Rank Minor Reading Assessment Tool, to us that's a new innovation. Something that nobody else has done before, and we're going to continue down the path of that technology. Okay, what can we add to the Rank Minor voice analytics system to make our tool a little bit more accurate? Well, one thing we can do is bring in eye tracking technology. Now, eye tracking is measuring the eye at a point where one is looking at the motion of an eye relative to the head. There's a lot of other definitions. Now, when you measure eye performance, it's done through something called saccades. And I listed several there, but there's two very important that we're looking at. The visually guided saccade. If you're reading something, you're actually implicitly being guided by reading the different words and sentences and the sequence of the sentences. But there's another saccade that's important, and that's the scanning saccade. What are they actually scanning and looking at as they're going through the reading process? Now, important in this is the point of gaze, and that's where the eyes are focused. It can be a moving stimulus or a fixed point. Now, the fixed point's important, but also important is pupil dilation. If we can actually take that into account also, it's going to be a little bit more accurate. Head position is important, but what's really important is the heat map, and that's fixations on a stimulus or object over a period of time. Now, if you see all those little, it looks like a Doppler weather type thing. That's a heat map, and that's where eyes are focused and phased on. If we can start capturing that, maybe we can get additional data to assess reading levels. So eye trackers and measuring devices. There's two types, monocular and binocular. Monocular, of course, it's just looking at one eye. Binocular is two eyes at the same time. Now, there's a ton of different types of eye tracking technologies out there. Head-mounted, which is very bulky, not really usable. Bars, which fit on the bottom of a screen or on top of a screen. Mobile devices, and I have that highlighted because that's important. If you can actually do eye tracking through your mobile devices, say a Kindle or even your smartphone, all of a sudden you have a natural device to do eye tracking. And there's a lot of SDKs out there that allow you to actually develop little applications that can do analysis. Vendors for eye tracking. Sensomotic. They're out of Germany and the USA here. They're very popular, they're very good, a lot of people use them. Eye Tracking Incorporated, Tobai, Gaze Point, but I highlighted the Eye Tribe out of Denmark. And the Eye Tribe, they specialize in actually doing eye tracking on mobile devices. What I have here is a Samsung 7. And most of you may not realize it, but for your Android cell phones, the new ones, you actually have a little camera here The iTribe has the technology to load up eye tracking to where if you're looking at your iPhone, it's tracking your eye movements. Now, a lot of people on their phones also don't realize it, but they're actually tracking your eye movement on your phone and reporting back to something. I regularly check to make sure that that's not on mine, by the way. So what's the enhancement to the ranked minor reading assessment tool? We can identify specific words a reader is focused on when they're having problems and when they're not. We can identify words which are read wrong but are kind of glossed over by the reader. We can identify sequences of phonemes the reader is focused on, in other words, when he's having problems with. And that's very important data to actually supplement that voice analytics. Okay, brain-computer interfaces, something that I really like. I own one, by the way. There's two types of these. Internal, which are neural chips and probes that are implanted. I don't like those, by the way. And external, ones that are worn on the body. So, okay, how are we going to use a brain-computer interface in this paradigm? Well, first we've got to understand what brain-computer interfaces do. It measures and analyzes brain EEG signals. And I have them all listed there. And the ones that I highlighted apply to actually applying this BCI innovation to the ranked minor reading assessment tool. Alpha waves, delta waves, gammas, and theta, all of them. But then again, you have to have the knowledge or the expertise or team members that understand how to weave these different types of waves together. Now, why would we want to do that? I'll get to that in a moment. Brain-computer interfaces, there's different types. Headsets, multi-channels are available now. The more channels you have, the more accurate the measurements are going to be. But they're bulky and hard to maintain. I have a 16-channel one. It's a headset, and it's difficult to use. Believe me, I'm always adjusting it. But there's a new type of device emerging and is on the market, and it's body devices. Devices that fit around your arm or leg, and there's even a wristband device now. What I didn't realize before, until I got into this area, your brain EEG signals travels through the skin, and it can be detected by a wrist device. To me, that's a real novel innovation. Now, there's a ton of support libraries out there, a ton. This field is exploding. And I only listed two, only because they've been around the longest, BCI 2000 and OpenVibe. By the way, plug for my French colleagues, OpenVibe is a French library, and it's very good. Okay, the different types, vendors. We have Emotive, and that's the type that I have. I'm going to be switching. I did highlight Freer Logic and Play Attention. Now, what you're seeing on the screen right now is the new Freer Logic wristband. You don't have to put like a pressure cup around your arm like the old one or use a bulky headset. This is just a wristband, just like your watch. Now, there's a lot of research centers out there that's doing work in this area. CNRS in France, they're doing a lot of good work, mainly in relation to learning, education, and training. And their mantra is we make learning a bit more fun using BCIs. University of Central Florida, just down the road from here, they do a lot of research on BCIs, and I'll get to the importance of their research in a moment. But if you notice, I highlighted a company called Play Attention. And Play Attention, I found those when I was doing my research and due diligence on Freer Logic. Freer Logic actually deals with Play Attention, and they provide their BCI devices. Now, Play Attention, look them up. It's playattention.com. They do novel work they successfully treat attention deficit disorder with their software and BCI. And primarily what they're doing is actually teaching children to focus. And once you start teaching them how to focus, all of a sudden, ADD tends to go away, because part of ADD is a lack of focus. So I highlighted Play Attention because I love them. I think they're doing novel work, especially in the treatment of ADD. Okay, so what's the enhancement to the Rank Minor reading tool? Well, we can identify the cognitive state of a reader when encountering specific words, and that's important. In other words, are they confused? Are they focused? Do they have cognitive dissonance? It's just more data to actually analyze a person's reading skill. Now, we can also identify cognitive states when a certain sequence of phonemes are encountered. And if they're having trouble with certain sequences and the cognitive state shows that they're confused or show cognitive dissonance, then all of a sudden that's even more valuable data so that the true human reading experts can come up with a treatment plan. So we have all three of those there. Rank Minor reading assessment tool, voice analytics, eye tracking technology, and brain-computer interfaces brought together for something new and novel. So it's bleeding edge. I don't call it leading edge technologies. That's too passé. And what I like is to use the word bleeding edge for these things that are very novel and that have a noble purpose. So eye tracking and BCI, there's a lot of work that's been done. UCF, University of Central Florida, has already successfully integrated for learning, education, and training eye tracking and BCI. Their work is novel, what I consider bleeding edge, and it's really good for feedback into an adaptive learning system. SMI, that eye tracking technology mentioned, and Emotive, they offer an integrated package meant for marketing analysis. In other words, they can actually, through an ad, see where your eyes are focused and your cognitive states. So for marketing, that's great. But then again, I believe in noble purposes. It can also be used for learning, education, and training. Now, it's not a giant step to integrate all three. It really isn't. But it does take some work. So how are we going to make that a reality? Well, here's what we're doing. It's not innovation at this point, it's invention. And there is a difference between innovations and a difference between inventions. So what are some of the inventions that we need that we're actually working on right now? Integration of that reading assessment tool, the verbal stuff, with eye tracking and BCI. New analysis techniques. If you have all this new data, how are you going to effectively analyze it? Well, I can tell you right now, there's no analysis techniques that can do that. It has to be invented. So we're inventing those analysis techniques. When you look at the different tasks involved and what each little component or innovation has to do, there's new subtasks that you have to assign to them, which again leads down into more analysis techniques that need developed. Now, evaluation techniques, it's a little bit different than analysis. Those evaluation techniques, we need to actually map over to a person themselves. First grader, second grader, third grader, fourth grader, adult, college student. But then again, you get into something else that's needed, standards. What is a standard? And I don't mean a global standard, because each standard for identifying what those requirements are for reading skills is usually culturally defined. But then again, is there a framework that you can use to actually exchange that type of information? That's where you have to standardize. Now, is there standards for what types of brain EEG signals that you should be using? Of course there are. and that has to be standardized. Now, the number one problem that I foresee in these types of technologies that exist right now, not only in the future, is security. How are we going to secure this data to make it private? Because you don't want this data getting out into the real world, especially for marketing people who would take advantage of it, or other people who would take bad advantage of it. So the security standards to protect the individual when you're using this ensemble need to be developed. This ensemble, it's bleeding edge, but it's a little bit more than that. It's an ensemble innovation with a noble purpose, and that's the best types of innovation that you can find. Thank you very much.